All right, we are at the top of the hour. Again, welcome everyone to the Spring MIP Lunch and Learn. This is Luke Lothamer, and I'll be presenting our topics here today. So we're going to talk about spring cleaning and tips and tricks within MIP. If anyone has connection issues, audio, video, please contact Leah Peters. Her number is there on the screen, and I'll hover my cursor over the number there. So again, if you have any issues, please contact Leah. If you would like to receive CPE credit for today's Lunch and Learn, please email Leah at her email address there on the screen. And just note that you would like to receive CPE credit and put that in the subject line of your email. We are using GoToWebinar like we have in the past. Many of you may be familiar having attended past Lunch and Learns or user groups. So we will take questions via the chat box. You can see there on this in the screenshot on my screen currently. We're not going to be opening lines, and we will pause periodically to review questions. So please feel free to submit those. If there are any towards the end that we don't get to, we will be sure to follow up afterwards. Today's agenda, we'll do some introductions to start us off, and then we're going to cover how to tidy up your MIP database, potentially removing years of clutter and unnecessary reports. We'll go into how to track your favorite reports and transactions in the software. And then we will end by showing you user-specific and universal settings in the software that you can modify. Our MIP team consists of myself and Adam Westcurtis, both of us there on the screen. If you ever have any questions, feel free to email either of us or give us a call. For those of you who are new to the Lunch and Learn or to DWD in particular, we are a CPA firm established in 1939, located in the northeast corner, Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have right around 65 staff. We are part of the technology division. We are consisted of software consultants, who many of us are also CPAs, and we also have network engineers. We have been nominated for top 100 VARs with Accounting Today and Bob Scott's. We do offer other software solutions in addition to MIP. You'll notice many of those on the left-hand side of the screen start with Sage. So we are a Sage business partner. You might have heard of some of these other solutions such as Sage 100, BusinessWorks, Sage 50, which was also Peachtree, and a few others there at the bottom. The latest and greatest Sage product nowadays is Sage Intacct. And Sage Intacct, I've described this in previous Lunch and Learns, it's the most comparable to MIP. So if you have been potentially outgrowing MIP or looking for a change, Intacct is the new modern go-to, if you will. And I do want to take a few minutes to just show you kind of what Intacct looks like. So if you've been considering a potential change, you might consider Sage Intacct. So here on the slides, I've kind of given you a view of the dashboard that can be seen within Intacct. And I'm going to pull up here on my screen. I'll just kind of mention Intacct is a cloud-based product or solution, meaning you can view it within any web browser. So you can log in from home, log in from the office. You don't have to have a VPN connection, excuse me, just a good internet connection. I'm showing you the dashboards. Many current clients love this feature. You can have role-specific dashboards. If I click this, I'm currently on the CFO. You can set them up specific to various positions. So you can show certain things and you can exclude others. These are all drill down capable, so you can click on any part of that graph there, and it will bring up a report. From there, you can drill down even further. And it'll take you into the actual entry itself. So great functionality to get down into the transaction level of a specific period in time and account. So then I'll just back out to this. You'll see many other widgets. You can have various trend charts. You can include other revenue and expense charts and graphs. If I click this menu here at the top, you'll see the module selection. So they have many different offerings here that, depending on an MIP, purchasing is one that is included as a part of the core package. Many of you on the call may use Microy or have heard of Microy. So Intact has its own purchasing module as well as many others. So again, I would say if you've considered switching off of MIP or looking into other options because you've outgrown it, let Adam or I know if you would like to see more about this. All right, let's go back to my slides here. DWD Technology Group, we also offer network services, so managed IT security plans, data backup services, Microsoft Office 365, and also managed IT services. So if you're looking for any of those options as well to go along with an accounting solution, let us know on that front as well. All right, we're going to jump into our first topic of the day, and that's going to be how do I tidy up my MIP database to remove years of clutter and unnecessary reports. I am going to pull up my MIP database. You can follow along with the slides if you have those printed off, or if you have multiple screens, you can view those on one and this on the other. So the first thing I'm going to show is related to marking different things inactive or discontinued. So the first I'm going to pull up here is going to be a specific account. So if I go out to our chart of accounts, this is my demo organization here. We've got our list of accounts here that you can see. I'm going to scroll down. And let's jump to page 2. What I'll point out here is I have an account out here, 54101. You'll notice in the title I have -do not use. So if any of you here on the call today have anything like this where it says do not use or old next to it, and it still appears as an option for users to select, you might consider updating the status so that users cannot select that. So when I go out here to enter it, the transaction, you'll notice here I have this account out here to be selected. Now the -do not use isn't very helpful if a user can still select it. So what I would strongly recommend is if there are accounts out there that should no longer be used, you'll double click on the account in question and update the status. So you've got 2 other statuses outside of active that you can select. What inactive is going to do, let's go ahead and take a peek at what that does if you're unfamiliar. If I still select that account, you'll notice that it does have an I next to it now. This message pops up and says GL 54101 is inactive. It is a warning though, and users can still select it. So that is one option. Let's go ahead and put this back to where it was. And let's change that account. do discontinued, and we'll go ahead and save that. And let's go back to my entry screen here. Now you will notice there is no 54101. So discontinued removes it entirely from the drop-down list. So if there's an account that should not be used, you'll want to discontinue it. And then that ensures that nobody can select that in error. And again, the inactive will still show here in the list, but give the user a warning message. So that is my first cleaning tip for your MIP database for today. This also applies to vendors. So if you come out here to your vendor listing, if you haven't done a review of your vendor list in quite some time, I'd strongly encourage looking through there and then marking your vendors inactive or discontinued, depending on if they should or should not be used going forward. Same thing applies here. So if there's a vendor, inactive is going to allow the user still to see it, but provide a warning message. Discontinued, you can see that I got an error message marking discontinued because there is activity in the system. It may impede processing related to this vendor. If they have outstanding items, again, you'll want to make sure that anything is paid or updated that's outstanding before doing this. But again, if it's a vendor that hasn't had any activity in years, you will not receive this message. So by doing this, when we come back out here to my vendor ID, you'll no longer see ABC office supply. It's not in the listing there. So again, I would suggest reviewing your vendor list and marking any as discontinued if they should no longer be used. You can always come back out and remark them as active. So if they, you haven't bought anything from them in 2 years, but then something comes out of the woodworks, you can go and flip the status back to active. It's not like you have to recreate the vendor or anything like that. Also, in addition to updating the status of vendors, let's go back to my vendor list. If you need to merge or potentially rename, maybe a company changed names over the years, you do have the ability to rename. You don't have to create a whole new vendor for the same company you've been doing business with just because they changed their name. What you'll have to do is, I'm going to point out this one here. Just you'll see I've got International Supplies and International Supplies Incorporated. To me, that's a duplicate vendor. You might double check the address. In this case, the address is different. So potentially you might have two with the same name, different locations. For our example today, we're going to assume that these are duplicate. They just moved to a different address. So in this case, we need to merge one into the other. So to do so, I opened up International Supplies, and I'll point this out real quick. You're going to see an icon up here that is currently gray, and I'm hovering over it so that you can see the message. It says merge/rename vendor ID. If you're trying to accomplish the merge feature and this is grayed out, it's likely because you'll have to have it be a blank form first. So I would recommend clicking New. You'll notice that icon appears and we can select it. And let's go ahead. I've got a transaction open, so that will prevent me from merging a vendor. Let's go ahead and close here. We're not going to save that. Okay, so International Supplies is now going to become International Supplies Incorporated. You'll notice two radio dots here, merge and rename. I'm going to merge this one into the incorporated, and we're going to, I'm going to use duplicate vendor here. You can put any comment there that you need to. This is telling you the merge process will merge all records into and delete the old vendor ID. Many of you may have questions if you've never done this before. What's going to happen to all the transactions that were entered to the old vendor ID? What the system does is it rolls those over, but it maintains the old vendor ID. So you can run a report, and it's all for audit purposes. You can run a report to show which ones were the old vendor ID and which ones were now the merged vendor ID. So no concerns there. There is a little concern here. Any user-defined fields for the old vendor will be deleted. So if you have user-defined fields tied to a vendor record, just keep that in mind. And then also 1099 adjustments, if you have any of those, you'll need to then add those into the new vendor ID because they won't be carried over. I'm going to go ahead and click yes. We're going to continue. And then now when I go back to my vendor listing, all that is left is International Supplies Incorporated. If I go back to that icon one more time here and select another, if there's a name change, all you have to do is click the rename option. You'll type in whatever the new vendor ID may be, and then comments, notes for what the name change was for. And then same thing applies. The new vendor ID will remain. The other will be consolidated or removed. However, you will still have history available to show when the name change took place. All right, so we're going to move away from AP vendors. I will say the same thing applies to customers. So if you use the AR module and you have customers, you can do the same merge rename feature there too. So keep that in mind for vendors and customers. And we're going to close a few of these tabs here at the bottom. All right, so the next cleaning tip on a way to tidy up your MIP database, these are going to be related to reports. So if we come out here to reports, I'm just going to go to my financial statements and my statement of revenues and expenditures. This could apply to any report type within the software. I'm using this as my example though. Those of you who have been on MIP or your organization has been on MIP for years, your drop down may look a little bit like mine here that I have. You'll notice I've got financial statements with years 2014 all the way through 2024. I've got the same financial with names next to it. I will say the ones with years next to them, that's a big pet peeve of mine when I look at client systems and there's a lot of the same report with different things on the end. That is a big item that you can clean up on your own. I would say many organizations are afraid they're going to remove something, but if you were to remove reports, you're not removing data. You're really just removing how that data was presented. So for instance, my 2014, maybe you do still want to run 2014 financials down the road, but you can do that with any of these reports. The big difference is the dates here that you are looking to run that report on. So again, I would look at cleaning up your report menu so that you don't have as many options, especially if you're having new users come in, or it's inevitable they have turnover at some points. And so when new users come in and they see all these options, I'm sure it can be overwhelming. The system doesn't have an audit history for reporting. So like you can delete these. I wouldn't give everyone the ability to delete, but if you are a decision maker in your company, I would certainly review your reports, and then you have the ability, like I'm going to do now, something from 2014, we're going to go ahead and delete that. Now that's gone. And if you were going to delete multiple at once, you can click the find button down here at the bottom right. You can see all of these, and maybe I'm going to leave just the one for 2024 out here. Click the red X, delete, and those are gone. All right. I do understand those reports with names on the end. So maybe you as a user have a way that you run your report different from Brad, Cassie, Logan. That's fine. But if there are employees who are no longer with the company, again, I would probably remove those unless you think there's a reason to keep them around. Even so, if it has the name of a person who's no longer with the company, what I might do is you might come out here and say that icon right there is going to allow you to rename. So if we change this and change that, now you'll see Nathan changed to Sherry there in this case. That way you don't have reports out there that don't make much sense and you or another user are wondering, well, I've never run that. I'm not sure what that's even used for. So a few things you can do to clean things up, even if you aren't comfortable deleting the reports. Another feature related to that icon up there, you can copy it. So if you want to speed up, again, not change anything related to the report, you can copy it and make it your own. Okay, so I kept Sherry's in there and then I added one with my name. So the copy and rename feature for reports, again, is this icon here with the floppy disk. I would use that to your advantage. Again, if it's user specific, I would also point out if you don't want to allow others to change your report, you can check that box there when you're creating this. You can also do it on the security tab. Do not allow changes. So what that does is if anyone tries to view your report, they can view it, but they can't make changes to it. So it's not like other users can make modifications and then when you come back in to open it and wonder what changed, this would prevent any other user from changing your report. All right, so again, to recap reports, if you're a decision maker, I would strongly consider, if you have the time, reviewing your report listings and deleting any that haven't. Again, I'll point out the last modified date too. If there's something that's out here from 2005, 2006, whatever it may be, these are default reports, but any that have been created within your organization, you might delete them. Reports can always be recreated, so it's not like you're removing data from the system. So deleting is one option. Renaming or copying, that's another way to keep things cleaner within your organization. So just a few tips there. All right, if any of you use distribution codes, I've got a slide in my slide deck there. Same thing applies. If you use them and then, okay, you no longer need to or something changes, you can make them inactive or discontinued so that they can't be used. Distribution codes are one that you can't delete because they have history tied to them. You'll just have to make them discontinued and they'll no longer appear. One final option to tidy up your MIP database, you will have to have the ability to change permissions for this one. You can go to your security menu and we can actually remove options from users' menus. So if there are things out here they shouldn't see, or maybe you don't utilize in your organization and don't need other users to see and ask questions about, such as dashboard, the dashboard here in MIP. If you don't use it, you can remove that. Same with any of these reports. So like 990, your organization may file one, but maybe you don't run that report within the software or the GASB reporting. I'll show you how you can kind of remove those menu options so that those are not seen in the menu. If you go to your security menu here, down to set up organization menus. Select a specific user, and we're going to expand the main accounting one here. If you do not want to see dashboard, you can uncheck this box here. Same thing applies to any of these other ones. If they shouldn't see certain things, maybe organization, those are more administrative options. They shouldn't see that. You can uncheck it. From a reporting standpoint, you'll have to expand that. And then here's my 990 worksheet one. Let's go ahead and uncheck these boxes. Same thing with the GASB. And we'll go ahead and save this. Okay. And let me log into that particular user. You'll notice at the top here, I don't see a menu for dashboards. I also don't see anything 990 related or GASB. So that could apply to any of these options. Maybe you have specific reports you want certain employees to run. You can control it at a detailed level so that they don't see it. They don't even know that that's an option. So that may be another option to keep users clean and tidy so that they only see what they're responsible for. So you may already be doing something like that, but if you're somebody who can control the permissions, you can update that. I will pause here and see if we have any questions before moving on to the next topic.
Yes, Luke, we do have a number of questions here. When you first started talking about cleaning up MIP, you were talking about discontinuing accounts. And we had a question, when accounts are discontinued, how can that affect historical reports? Will it print for the P&L, for example?
That is a good question. So it will print. It just won't be available to be used when users are entering transactions.
Then when you were merging vendors, Amy is asking, can you show us what a report would look like for a merged vendor?
Yeah, so let's see if I have one out here. So here's what I'll point out. This is what I was looking for. So depending on the report, you may or may not have this available to you, but you can add original vendor ID, merged / rename date, type, any comments you might have added. So let's add that in there. And when I print this, you'll see International Supplies Incorporated that I merged. There's the original vendor ID and then my comment. So again, this is one option. Not all reports are going to have the ability to add the original vendor ID, but in this case we can. I think there are a few other reports, but that's what you'll look for as far as columns to include.
Okay. Then the last question is there a way to delete multiple budget worksheets?
Multiple budget worksheets. So I'm coming out here to the budgeting module, budget worksheets. You don't have the find at the bottom, so you're going to have to click those and delete them individually in that case.
Okay, that is it for now for questions.
Okay. Great questions. All right, so let me close a few of these tabs here. And the next topic we're going to go into is the best way to track your favorite reports and transactions in the software. All right, and if you're following the slides, I've got 2 slides related to this topic, and I'm not going to show the modern interface one, but if you're on MIP Cloud, the modern interface, they did introduce somewhat recently the ability to add report favorites. So you can add your favorite reports out there, run them, edit them from that specific area. So keep that in mind. What I'm going to show here is in the classic interface, and I've said it in the past, I'd say the process manager to the right, it's the most underutilized feature in the software. Some organizations we've seen have it built out, and it works quite nicely for them. So it really just takes a little bit of time setting it up for yourself or specific users on your team. So you may only see a favorites folder out here. That means you haven't added anything to your favorites yet. If you don't see this available to the far right of your screen, you may have to pick a different module, because you'll notice if I'm on the help and support tab, I don't see it. So if you select a module, then now that appears. Or it could be another reason out here, the view menu, and you'll have to select the process manager so that it appears on the far right. What you might use this for could be a variety of reasons, but what I've seen it, you can build out unique folders like I've done so for financial statements and accounts payable. You'll want to right click, you can create new folders and call it whatever you'd like. If for some reason you don't have the ability to create a new folder, I've seen that in the past, and it's a conflict with MIP. MIP likes to be on your primary screen. So if you have multiple, you might move MIP around to a different screen. And if you determine which one's your primary screen, you should see the create new folder. So just keep that in mind if you don't see this option. Once you've created your folders, or if you just want to keep the main primary favorites folder there and add things to this, you'll notice two additional tabs here at the bottom of this section. This one's reports, this one's forms. So the middle one is report related. And I want to point out a couple things here related to that. The reports that are showing here are directly related to the module that's selected to the far left. So you'll notice AP. These are AP related reports. If I go over here to Session Manager, I get different reports. And same thing, jumping, there's budget, allocations, AR, and so forth. Okay, so you'll want to make sure you're on the right module if you're looking to add a specific report to your favorites. The other options are forms. So when the system says forms here, that means anything you can enter, such as transactions, vendors, customers, anything like that, that's considered a form. So if you're AP related, if your role is AP related, you might come out here to transactions, accounts payable, enter AP invoices. If you add this to your favorites and double click on it, it takes you directly out to where you can enter a session ID for your AP. And then you can just jump right into things. So what I've done out here in my environment, I've created an AP folder and I've created steps out here. So if maybe you have multiple people who are responsible for AP, you could have a primary person and maybe you have a backup person. If you keep this consistent, they both know what the process is for an AP check run. So they start out by entering AP invoices. Maybe they run an unposted report to review the coding. From there, after the coding's been reviewed and is confirmed, they would post the AP invoice session. From there, you might select your invoices for payment. If you're not the primary person, you need to run a report showing those that are selected for payment and obtain approval for those. From there, you print your checks, you post your AP payment session, you run a check register and save it. And then I've added two more options here just for ease of use. So if you use the vendor balances screen quite often, I've added that. Double click it. You can jump right into the vendor balances. I've also added an AP aging report. So I've added the numbers, and you can rename any of these. So maybe a specific person in your organization is responsible for this step. Maybe you put a name next to it. You can rename any of these to whatever you want them to show. So this enter AP invoices takes you to that screen. This takes you directly to a report to run. So that's an unposted report, and so forth. Again, I would take the time, if you're a somewhat larger organization or have multiple people in your AP department, this is a good way to make sure your backups know what the process is. If your primary goes out on vacation or is sick, it just helps out in that instead of having to scramble and understand what the primary person does with their process. I've also added a folder with financials. So this could be great for a controller or a CFO. You create a folder for your financials and then include any of the reports you run on a regular basis. This goes back to my cleaning tip earlier today. If you have a ton of reports out there and you have to like scroll or sift through ones from over the years, this is an easy way to include the ones you know you're going to run. And I have 4 reports here. Maybe you have X amount of reports you provide to a board. I would just include all of those here in your folder, and then you run those at the end of the month or whenever your board meeting may be, instead of having to pick and choose through all of those reports that you have out there. So another thing to consider, you can share these folders with other users. So like I was mentioning, a primary and a backup for the AP process. If you wanted to share your financial packet with another user, you can publish these folders. You'll see when I right click on that, publish public folder. It's now been published. Other users can come out here if you click on this white space and import public folder. You'll now see accounts payable. They can select it and add it to their process manager. So the process manager is user specific. This is going to be different for each user, but you can make different pieces consistent and have the ability to add those folders to other users' process manager. If you want to remove anything or rename, when you right click on the different pieces, you'll see remove from favorites, rename, expand is going to just expand what I have there. Same thing with these items. If a report is no longer valid, you can remove it entirely. I'll point this out too. I've been double clicking on these options here. When you double click on it, it automatically runs it with the settings from when it was last saved. So if you need to update dates from the prior month, you'll want to click edit. That will then take you out to the report. You can update your dates here and then save it. Otherwise, you might be getting last month's data and reporting on that instead. I will pause here and see if there are questions on the process manager.
Yes, there is one. When you were showing like how to rename and delete favorites, how do you add a new favorite?
Sure. So when you come, you'll want to come up to the top level and right click on the favorites, create new folder, and then you could add that like so.
Okay. That's it for questions.
Okay. I will also mention, because I didn't go through this step, I have these pre-built. Let's say you were going to add something AR related. Let's look at, again, like I said before, you want to make sure you're on the right module so you're getting the right reports. So I'll click on AR, and I'm going to expand AR analysis here. And I want to find my aged receivables. Okay. Once you find that, you'll right click on that item, and I'll point out too, these are specific reports. So if you look at the icon, it looks like a blank piece of paper. That's an actual report. This would be if you want to pick a report from the drop down. So if I double click on this, that's where you can pick any of these reports. If I go back here and I select an actual report, it's going to run the report as opposed to take you to that drop down menu. So you'll right click and say add to favorites. When you add it, it's going to add it with that name. So in my mind, that's a little too much for me. I want to rename it and just call it customer aging. Once renamed, I can drag it and drop it there. And then now that's included within that particular folder. All right. Up next, we're going to talk about user-specific and universal settings within the software. So what each user can change, and then what admins can change to reflect universally in the software. We're going to start with user-specific first, and I kind of highlight these in my slides, so if you need to refer back to them, you're going to get a recording after the Lunch and Learn, but the slides kind of show this as well. So first up is going to be the customized workstation settings. Some of you may already be familiar with it, but I'll point these out. The options menu at the top, customized workstation settings. Each user is going to have this, and when you click on it, you're going to get a window that pops up with various tabs. So I'm going to go through a couple things here with us while we have some time left. The ones I always typically enable for new users, it's going to be save form layout. What that does is if there's somebody who's going to enter transactions and they want to have the segments, descriptions, and other things in a particular order or particular size of the column, when they save it, that layout's going to reappear the next time they go into enter a transaction. So that ensures that layout is saved and they don't have to readjust everything the next time they are entering something. Okay, so I would check that box. I'm going to come down to apply offsets on save/post. If you have offset assignments set up, and what I mean by that is if you have expense accounts, that should be offset with your AP account. Checking that box when you hit save or post, it's going to apply that AP account automatically, so you don't have to code 2 lines in your entry. And I'll show an example of that here in a second. This one is somewhat user specific. Some people like it, others it doesn't really matter. Instead of using the tab key on your keyboard to jump from field to field, you can change this so your enter key will move field to field instead. If you're used to using a number pad, the enter key can come in handy so that you don't have to jump across the keyboard to hit the tab key. Records per page, this is probably my personal favorite. I don't like looking at page by page. I'd rather scroll up and down to see all of the options. I always change this to 1000 so I can see up to that amount before I have to jump to the next page. Okay, and let's go ahead and we'll go through these other tabs here. I'm going to apply and I'm going to show you the apply offsets on save/post in case you're not aware of that one. When I come out here to my AP session that I had started earlier, let me pull up my AP invoice here, and I'm going to delete my offset that I have. Okay, so you've entered your expense row. I've got my $500 charge here. When I click save, as long as the offset is set up, it automatically applies it. So you'll notice that row with my AP account, it automatically does that. You don't have to enter it manually. You also have the ability to apply offsets using this icon. But again, if you have that setting turned on, you don't have to know which icon to select. You just hit save, it automatically does that for you. So that's one I always turn on. You just have to make sure the offset is set up in your system. Let's go back to our customized workstation settings here. One more. Again, you probably can't tell, but I'm hitting the enter key and it's jumping from field to field. Same thing as what tab would do, but if you prefer to use your number pad, that enter key could be beneficial to you. All right, let's jump to our next tab here in the customized workstation settings. I'll point out a few here that I usually turn on or turn off for specific users. I always usually turn on confirm undo. This can eliminate some risk when somebody says undo on updates that have been made. When you click undo at the bottom of a screen that you've made changes to, it automatically undoes everything from the last save point. So this at least makes it an additional step that says, are you sure you want to undo everything before you actually do it? So I usually turn that on. The other one is if you have recurring entries that are coming due or invoices when you first log into the system and it's become somewhat annoying for you, you can turn those off by unchecking these boxes here. Or if you would prefer to see those that are coming due and you currently do not, you can always check those boxes. Next up, I'm going to jump over the reports one, and the colors. This is a very useful one in my mind. Highlight required fields. You can even pick what color you want those required fields to be. By default, they're going to be yellow. And then I also usually turn this grouping from 0 to 1. And then I'll shade the color different from the other. So it's easier to see differing rows because it alternates colors. You can see what lines up with, if it's a long line, you can see what lines up together. And we'll go ahead and click apply here and OK. And let me go ahead and close this session and reopen it. You'll notice my session ID is required. It is now yellow. When I selected it, now the status and this date, all three of these fields are required. Description is optional. Invoice number is required before you can even start. And then now you'll notice the other required pieces of information here. Down below, you'll see this alternates colors. So again, you can change those colors. I just left mine as the default, but it's easier to see what accounts, what amounts line up with each other because of the alternating colors. So again, that's going to be customized workstation settings, colors, check the box for highlight required fields, and then you have the other ones here. So I would strongly recommend that just so you know what needs to be filled in for the required fields. All right, so we'll go ahead and cancel there. I've updated mine. One other user-specific area that you may already be familiar with, but for those of you who are not, the entry defaults table. This can be useful if you're using, maybe you're somebody who is always booking entries to the same grant code, program, department. something like that. This is where you can set a default. Or if there's only one code, such as a future segment in your organization, you can default the code here. Therefore, you don't have to input it each time. For me, I'm going to default this to the operating fund, and we're going to say that I'm always posting everything to the social service program. And so what that does is when I come down to enter another row, let me input the grant first. You'll notice when I input that, my fund populated, my program populated, my GL is tied to the vendor, that auto populated, and therefore you only have to fill in a few other fields as opposed to all of them. What I would probably recommend if you're going to do this, start with a field that you have to populate. Okay, it doesn't like that. Let me restart this. Let's move our grant all the way to the right. So that's the first thing we populate. So we start with 101 here in my case, then these populates, and then you get a few more that you have to enter. Start with something that you have to type in, and then those fields will default, and you'll know what else needs to be input. So the default entry defaults is a good one to use, and it is user specific, does not apply for everybody in your organization. All right, final two that I'm going to get to on our lunch and learn here today are going to be universal, and they can be found within organization at the top, organization preferences. These may need to be updated by an admin user or somebody with the right security permissions. Entry dates table. This is important to keep your transactions in the right periods and to ensure that they're not being booked to a prior year, prior month that has been closed. And even so that they're not booked it so far into the future, if somebody accidentally types in the wrong year and it's 2 years ahead of time. This table here, as long as you keep it updated, will help prevent any of those coding errors related to the time period. So 4 columns. Right now I have my system to prohibit any entries that are prior to the year 2024. I'm assuming mine's a calendar year, but you might set it for your fiscal year begin. And you can change this date based on transaction. So some of these may be different than others. I've kept it consistent here. Users are not going to be able to save anything with a date prior to 2024. The second column here, I've set it up for the current month. So right now, if it's prior to May 1st, they're going to receive a warning as long as it's still in the year 2024. So anything from January through April. I've also set this up to have a warning for anything dated after May 31st. And then it's going to prohibit anything entered with a date after December 2024. Anything in between June and December, you're going to receive a warning message. Anything after that, users won't be able to input at all. So this is the universal setting. It applies to everybody. I would strongly encourage you to set this up and maintain it if you're not currently. It could help prevent errors. Everybody's human, and if you're using a number pad, you can miskey something here or there. So this just helps control all of that. Last but not least, I know we got a few minutes here. If you use auto sessions within the software, this table here controls the session IDs that were used. So this is going to show you your last session ID used for AP invoices and all these other transaction types. So if someone accidentally keyed in a session ID and it got thrown off from what the default was, you can come out here and set it back to what it should be. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm referring to, for an API session, let's go ahead and click my undo here. if you're creating a new API session, you can simply hit the plus key on your keyboard and it's going to number the next one in line. So you don't really have to put much thought into it. You don't have to wonder what you should call that session. It does that for you. So that auto numbering sequence is housed right here. And somebody with the right security permissions can reset it or update it from this table. So again, that's a universal setting, applies to everybody. I'll pause here with 1 minute to spare, see if we have any final questions before signing off.
We do have a couple questions related to offsets.
Okay.
One is asking, is there a way to get the full string coding for the offset?
Not for the offset.
Okay. We've got somebody else asking, can you have different offsets for different AR customers?
No, the offsets are going to be based on your fund or balancing dimension and the GL account. It will not be specific to a customer.
Okay. And we had just another question. She's asking, can we change the font size to make it larger? And I'm not exactly sure where exactly she was looking for that.
So one thing, it could be related to that, depending if it's report related or something different. But if what you see on my screen here is too small, or if you're viewing it on your screen, you can hit Control on your keyboard and use your scroll bar on your mouse, and it'll make this bigger. So that kind of zooms it in. So if that helps, or if we need further clarification, let us know.
Okay. And that's it for questions.
All right, I know we're 1 minute over here, but if you've got just another minute, I'll pull the slides back up, and let me jump to the very end here. All right, I'll just mention again, if you want to receive CPE for today's Lunch and Learn, email Leah in our office, and in the subject line, just put CPE credit. And then last but not least, thank you for joining us today. We had a great turnout as far as attendees go. If you have any further questions or need help with MIP, let Adam or I know via email or give us a call. Thanks, everybody.